It's been quite some time since the new 2022 iPhones launched in India, but Apple is now struggling to keep up with the demand of its iPhone 14 Pro models, ever since its primary assembly facility in China was impacted by COVID-19 restrictions. Apple itself has put out an official statement regarding the delays in the production of the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max. The question then is, should you wait for the iPhone 14 Pro or Pro Max or pick up last year's iPhone 13 Pro or Pro Max right away? For those who own an iPhone 13 Pro Max, does it make sense to upgrade this year? Well, let me help you with that today. I'll try to answer whether you should upgrade to the new iPhone 14 Pro this year or not. So, let's get started. The iPhone 14 Pro lineup looks and feels very much like last year's iPhone 13 Pro series or even the iPhone 12 Pro lineup from 2020, except for maybe the display. If you have an iPhone 13 Pro or the Pro Max, it's hard to tell the difference between them and the 2022 models, but simply looking at the backs of the phones. The iPhone 13 Pro lineup and the 14 Pro series are built using very similar materials, have almost the same dimensions, and share two of the same color options, gold and silver. When it comes to the display, Apple introduced the 120Hz Pro Motion display with the iPhone 13 Pro lineup, and it's the same tech used in the 14 Pro lineup too. I don't think you'll notice much of a difference when it comes to refresh rate, whether you're using the iPhone 14 Pro series or the iPhone 13 Pro series. The display of the 13 Pro Max is very sharp, has a high peak brightness, and is protected by ceramic shield. The only upgrades that the iPhone 14 Pro lineup brings are higher peak brightness levels of up to 2000 nits and the always-on display, which has received mixed reactions. Talking about the notch, the iPhone 13 Pro series has a slightly smaller notch than its predecessor, whereas the 14 Pro lineup uses the dynamic island, Apple's method of concealing the gap between the selfie camera and the Face ID cameras, both of which are now detached from the display bezel, thereby resembling an island in the screen. It certainly feels fresh and innovative. Each year, Apple introduces a new camera feature with added advancements to their hardware and software. For the 13 lineup, they introduced cinematic mode and a larger sensor for both the 13 Pro and the 13 Pro Max. The iPhone 13 Pro series still has some of the best smartphone cameras in the market right now. The pictures look amazing, computational photography is improved drastically, macro photos are some of the best that I've come across to date, and recorded video is excellent. It can capture some of the best looking 4K videos at 60 FPS in Dolby Vision HDR, which is still a distant dream for most other premium smartphones. Here are a few of the samples that I shot with the iPhone 13 Pro Max over the past year. Coming to the iPhone 14 Pro lineup, both the iPhone 14 Pro and the 14 Pro Max come with a bumped up main camera resolution of 48 megapixels compared to the 12 megapixel resolution which we've been seeing since the iPhone 6s. The new phones have a bunch of new hardware as well as exciting software features. Take action mode for instance, which lets you record some of the best stabilized videos on any smartphone camera to date. The iPhone 14 Pro series also uses the new photonic engine for more realistic details and colors in the photos. Night mode photos are better thanks to the added resolution and take less time to process. Cinematic mode on the 14 Pro series can now record in 4K 30 FPS, which is much appreciated as it is a plus if you need to crop the video while editing. The front camera on the iPhone 14 Pro lineup now has autofocus, which aids in sharper and more accurate selfies or videos. When I first started using my iPhone 13 Pro Max a year ago, it would last a solid 1.5 days with my typical usage habits, which includes frequent use of social media, binge watching, and occasionally recording videos. But as it ages, I noticed that I need to charge it at the end of the day now, since the battery health has now dropped to 88% after roughly 8 months of rigorous use. However, this is just my personal experience, as others might have different experiences depending on individual usage habits. Apple claims up to 28 hours of runtime with video playback on a single charge of the iPhone 13 Pro Max, and the iPhone 14 Pro Max has a claimed runtime of up to 29 hours, which is not a big upgrade. The iPhone 13 Pro Max uses the A15 Bionic 5G SoC, which is still very much capable and way ahead of its Android counterparts. Games still run well at their highest settings, multitasking is still great, and I have not felt any deficiency in performance whatsoever to date. The iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max have the A16 Bionic, which has a billion more transistors than the A15 Bionic, higher memory bandwidth, and small overall improvements which result in slightly higher benchmark numbers. However, you might not notice a huge performance jump in day-to-day activities. Now, coming to the most important aspect, the price. The iPhone 14 Pro Max, for example, starts at Rs 1,39,900 for the 128GB variant, and for the same amount or even lower based on discounts, you can get a new 256GB variant of the iPhone 13 Pro Max. It is currently readily available for purchase on popular online stores in India as well as offline retail outlets, while the 14 Pro Max currently has a waiting period. One thing to note is the iPhone 13 Pro and Pro Max have been officially discontinued this year, so you will not be able to buy it directly from apple.com. To put it simply, if you already own an iPhone 13 Pro Max, it does not make sense to go for the 14 Pro Max in my opinion. But if you don't have the 13 Pro Max and are still using something older such as the iPhone 11 Pro and are not in any hurry, then get yourself an iPhone 14 Pro or Pro Max, because some of the new features and improvements kind of justify the premium. Well, that's it for today's video. If you found this helpful, like and share it, and as always, keep following Gadgets 360 for all things tech.